Happy Halloween, everyone! It's probably the most wonderful time of the year. I am your host, JD, and this is the Figgy Pop Collector channel. And today we're going to be breaking down, talking about, and ranking a little anthology film that I just recently watched, and that was Tales of Halloween.
Starting transmission.
There are two types of horror films that I love to watch, and that's either going to be your found footage, which is my bread and butter. I don't know why I love found footage films, but I don't know, I really do enjoy them, and anthology films. So, an anthology film, if you're not aware, is basically a film that has multiple little short films that are either interconnected or they may not be, but they have like a wraparound story that actually tries to connect the stories together in some weird way or another. And with anthology films, they kind of remind me of when I go to film festivals and I check out like horror short films or animated short films and stuff like that. And you kind of get a bunch of different little films together. That's kind of why I enjoy watching anthology films because you get some really good ones in there or you get some really bad duds in there. And this film, Tales of Halloween, is pretty much the same. There are going to be some really good ones and some really bad ones. And today I'm going to be doing a ranking of all 10 of the shorts that make up Tales of Halloween. So, just to give you kind of a background of Tales of Halloween, the movie came out in 2015, and this film I would consider it a comedy horror anthology film. Whew, that's a mouthful. And there is some pedigree behind this film. So, you have people like David Lynn Bousman, Lucky McKee. You have who was the other guy? Oh, oh yeah, Neil Marshall, who directed segments of this film, and those are some pretty big names in the horror genre. And you also have cameos from legendary masters of horror like Mick, Stuart Gordon. I think John Landis is in there. Let's see who else was there. Joe Dante's in there. So yeah, you got some big names that are also making little cameos in this film too. And I think that's why I really, really did enjoy this one. You know, it's not going to be one of my top favorites like Trick or Treat or The Creep Show, but actually, after watching this, I'm going to consider it up pretty high in my tier of anthology films. And if you're interested in seeing me ranking different anthology films, go ahead and put it in the comment section down below. And I can go ahead and start putting together like a ranking of all the anthology films I've ever seen. So, kind of fun to do too. Let's go ahead and jump into my ranking of all 10 stories that make up Tales of Halloween. And so that you guys know that as we get into the ranking of these films, these are my opinion only. And I would love to hear from you guys on how you would rank all 10 of these short stories. In addition to that, be warned now, there will be spoilers. And again, like I said, this is my opinion, and I would love to hear from you guys. How would you rank all 10 of these stories? So let me give you a little bit of context to this film. So all 10 stories take place in the same little town, and you'll see characters being interacting with other characters from each of the stories. You'll hear about other characters in other stories. So kind of like how Trick or Treat did it too with their characters being interconnected. This is very similar too. And in addition, the wraparound of the story is Adrian Barboa, who's actually a DJ who is actually narrating the beginnings, like doing the narration in between each of the stories. It kind of gives you an idea of what each story is going to be about. So that kind of gives you a little wraparound. There's not much to it. There's nothing that happens. Like, for example, like in VHS, you have pretty cool wraparound stories. This wraparound is merely just to introduce you to each of the stories. So let's go ahead and dive into my number 10 on this list. Coming at number 10 is Ding Dong. And this is actually the sixth story in the whole movie. And this one, which is really sucks about this one, this is actually directed by Lucky McKee. And he's a great horror director. But this one I felt like was too silly, too weird. And I don't know. It just nothing really happened in the movie, and I think that's why I'm not a big fan of this one. But I think break it down and what the story's about. So when we first open up on the story, we're watching these like weird demonic hands coming out of flames. You're like, what the heck is this about? Adrian Barboa is narrating over this part too. And then we cut to a woman who's depressed that she doesn't have children. So her husband brings her their dog dressed as Gretel from like Hansel and Gretel to kind of give you an idea where the story is going to it. And the woman gets so angry, and she turns into this weird witch creature with like multiple arms and very demonic face. And she like throws her husband on the ground, and the husband then realizes her wife's a witch. Fast forward a year later, and we find out that she's now dressed as a witch. She's very happy and go lucky, and her husband is now dressed as Hansel. And as we progressively see through the night, they have this weird little skit that they're putting on that's kind of being like kind of mean and like, oh look, I'm goofy, like I'm a witch, I'm evil, I'm eating people, I have like body part. It's weird, it's really crazy. So yeah, so we see this skit going on for a while, and we actually do see some of the characters that we will see later in the series, or we've already seen in the series, and during this little short too. There are trick or treaters, and then we have so eventually a little boy shows up dressed as Hansel, and this like triggers something in the woman, and she starts kind of becoming more evil again, turning into the witch, and she's like, "I want this child," basically. And her husband like goes, "Hey, parents, it's over there. This is your child. Is this your child? And the mom shows up, takes the kid away, and says, "Thank you." But now she's so angry at him. She's so angry at her husband. And this where out of the blue, he kind of reveals that hey, he knew his wife wanted a child, and but he also knew about her little her other self, the witch version of her with the multiple arms. And so he had a vasectomy to make sure that he wouldn't have any kids. And this makes her go crazy. She turns back into the witch monster with the four arms, and she grabs her husband and tosses him into the oven. And the oven is now like some giant cavernous oven, like Hansel and Gretel storyline. And he basically cooks to death. And then she like starts melting and then dies too. It's such a weird story. I bet you there are some things in the story that are kind of like meaning or stuff behind the scenes, but it just didn't resonate with me at all, really. And that's pretty much why it's on my bottom of my list at number 10. I just didn't feel like it had any fun in it. It didn't have anything that actually made it stand out from the rest of the 10. Because as we keep going through the 10, you're going to see that there's a lot more creativity. There's a lot more cool scares. There's some really good like gore scenes and stuff like that. And this one just didn't live up to it, unfortunately. Which then leads me into my number 9. So my number 9 is Trick. So this is the third story in the movie. And the sad part about this one is that the first two stories that are in part of the movie are very whimsical and very fun. And this one is kind of mean spirited. And I think that's why it just didn't vibe with me correctly. Because it's very dark and it just didn't mesh well with the overall storyline that they're telling here. So what this story is we have four friends who are hanging out at home, they're getting high, they're drinking, and they're handing out candy to trick or treaters. One of the trick or treaters shows up, rings the doorbell. One of the guys gets up and walks over to hand out the candy. And this little girl is dressed as a witch. And he's like, like trick or treat and everything. And then she like stabs him in the stomach. It's so crazy. And we're like, whoa, what the heck was that about? Why is this little kid stabbing this person? And it causes like chaos in the house. And the other girl tries to get away. And when there's another kid hiding underneath the car. He slices her Achilles heel, which is there's something about cutting the Achilles tendon just, and that probably stems back to when I first saw Pet Cemetery. But anyways, and then we see another kid in the house who's torching the other guys in the house, and we follow this last final girl who's like running away, and she runs into like the pool house, and this pool house is kind of covered in plastic. You right notice right away, like, oh, that's kind of weird. But she's hiding in the corner. She's on her phone, and you're thinking, oh man, she's calling for help now. But no, she's actually deleting photos. And it's at this point we find out that her and her friends were kidnapping children and murdering them. It's so gruesome when you see what they're doing. And you're like, oh my God, these are horrible people. And these kids are like the ghost of those children that they've done this to in the past. And then the lights come on, and then their most latest victim is on a table, and then the victim comes back to life, and then we slowly watch all these ghost children go closer and closer and closer to her, and she screams. So yeah, so that's Trick, and that's what I mean. This one isn't like fun. It's very dark, very much it went there, which is really crazy to say, and it's very graphic. And it doesn't have any of the fun vibes that we'll see in the other stories. And that's why it's so low on my list. I mean, it's a little better of a story than I say with Ding Dong, and that's why it's a little bit higher. But man, being the third story in the movie kind of took down the mood. Luckily, the other stories are actually way more fun and actually kind of lighten up the mood after this. All right, let's go on into my number eight. All right, so number eight on my list is Bad Seed. And this one's actually directed by Neil Marshall. Yep, Neil Marshall, that action director who had a very promising start to his career. And I feel like he just kind of like disappeared. I know he's been directing TV shows and stuff like that. So he's been very active, but I could have sworn he was going to have a way bigger career than he actually ended up having after directing like Dog Soldier and The Descent. But you know what though? This one isn't as bad. It's kind of weird. It's a weird movie for him because this movie is very different for him because you would actually picture him being the director who would direct a more serious story. But no, he's having a lot of fun in the story. So what this story is basically about is that we start with this guy. He's carving up a pumpkin and his giant jack o' lantern on this massive, like massive pumpkin, and you're like, "Whoa, that's pretty cool." But let me just say, this pumpkin is very much like fake. You could totally tell that it's fake. It like super detailed. It is um it looks styrofoam. Okay? It looks styrofoam. That's pretty much what I say here. But I will say though, the pumpkin does look a lot better than the CGI pumpkins that we saw in Carved on the Hulu Bite size videos and the movie Carved. Yeah, this one actually looks pretty good being a practical effect in this scene. Anyway, so we find out this pumpkin comes to life, eats the guy that's carved him, and then we cut back to later where the detective is now investigating the crime scene and everybody's saying that, oh my god, it looks like a pumpkin ate this guy, and they're like, ha ha ha. The detective's like, "Ah, you guys are idiots. It's not a pumpkin." And it isn't until she's back at the police station where they're actually studying the actual bite on the person or I guess the way the body was bit in half that they find out, oh yeah, there was probably this is actually resembled a jack-o'-lantern's mouth, which is just like, oh really? So she's all like, no, no, that's crazy. So she ended up going to the police chief, and here in the scene, we actually get hints at all the other stories. That's actually the most relevant part of this, that we actually find out all these stories are taking place in the same town, is because this police chief is actually like he's actually telling about all these crimes that are happening in the town, and they all relate to one of the other stories in this movie. So now the detective goes on the hunt for this pumpkin monster, and she's traveling through town because there's other murders happening, and she eventually finds a random house. But she goes into this house, she goes in the backyard, and she finds what pretty much is a little pumpkin patch in his backyard. And she goes in this pumpkin patch and she's looking around, and then the evil pumpkin comes out and attacks her. She's like fighting it, she's like shooting at it, and then magically her partner, who wasn't with her originally, magically shows up with a shotgun, throws it to her at the right as the pumpkin's about to eat her, and she blows the pumpkin away and kills it. Yay, she saves the day. And then it's there that she realizes that on the back of the pumpkin, but this place is called the Clover Corporation, and it says like making 100% organic pumpkins. That's kind of what the slogan is. So her and her partner decide to go take a visit at the Clover Corporation, where they go knock on the door, and in this giant warehouse, only one guy working there, the scientist who created these pumpkins, who is played by the legendary Joe Dante, and he leads them into the warehouse where you can see rows, rows and rows of pumpkins. And you're like, oh shit, all these pumpkins are come to life eventually, and they're gonna take out this town. And then the movie ends. And that's the story in a nutshell. And it's a fun little short. It has some memorable little scenes in it. It's kind of too campy for what they're going for. And this is the 10th story in the whole movie. And I felt like we had some fun once, and this one went campy too far. but it was still more fun and it was more enjoyable than the other two before this one. And that's why I kind of have it ranked right now as number 8. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on to my number 7. So, coming in at number 7 is The Weak and the Wicked. This story is actually the fourth one in the film, and this is pretty much a simple revenge story. So, the story opens up with a boy in a cowboy costume. He's getting picked on by these 3 other bullies. They're like beating him up and everything, which is just weird. Because these kids, they're in their 30s and they're like beating up another kid that's in their 30s who are trick or treating. It's so weird. And then we see a boy, Jimmy, show up. And Jimmy's dressed like a minotaur. Like he's in a minotaur looking outfit. And he walks up to the 3 bullies and hands them a piece of paper. And on the paper is drawn the demon of All Hallows Eve. So this girl gets angry at him and basically chases him down. And they're chasing him and they turn a corner down one of these long alleyways and there's this like old trailer. And then we get a flashback to where we see these 3 young kids who are burning down this trailer with people in it. And we find out this boy Jimmy was the little boy that was his family that died in that trailer, and he's basically coming to get revenge on the bullies that murdered his family, and by summoning the demon of Hallows Eve. So the bullies realize who this kid is, and this was like the last surviving member of this family, and they go ahead and start beating up this kid. And you're like, oh my god, poor Jimmy. And then, out of nowhere behind them, shows up the demon of All Hallows Eve in a really cool costume. It's kind of like Minotaur slash demon looking. Shows up from behind them, takes up the 2 boy bullies, and then goes for the girl bully. And that's it. It pretty much ends there. And the boy gets up, smiles, and the demon just vanishes. And Jimmy got his revenge on the bullies. And that's pretty much what the story ends. This is a very simple story. It was so easy to follow. The practical effects they used for the Demon of Hallows Eve was really well done. I actually really enjoy that. I like the whole simple nature of a revenge story. This boy who's getting revenge for his family being murdered finds the bullies who somehow got away with burning a house and murdering 2 people. I do not know how that happened. And then we pretty much get the whole revenge. It's a nice little setup, a good little punch at the end, and that's kind of why I like this one. That's why it's a little bit higher on my list. Such a good little short horror film with a good hook and a good ending. So that's why it's pretty much this high on my list. All right, let's go on to number 6. So coming at number 6 is The Grinning Ghost. And this is actually the 5th story in the movie, and it's kind of like based on urban legends that we've all heard in our youth. And this one has the most cameos in all of the stories. Because you have Mick Garris, you have the late Stuart Gordon, you have Barbra Crampton, you have Lynn Shay, all making cameos in this little story. So yeah, that's really cool to see. It's really cool to see them in there. So let me get down to the story and what it's about. So the story opens up at the mother's Halloween party. She is throwing a Halloween party for all of her friends. Her daughter's there, and the mother is played by Lynn Shay, and the rest of the guests are the famous masters of horror. And her mom's telling a story about Mary Bailey. And Mary Bailey was this girl who was like kind of like deformed. And the story goes that on Halloween, if you hear somebody laughing, do not turn around. Because if you do turn around, Mary Bailey is going to take your eyes. And this actually freaks out the daughter. And her daughter's like, oh my God, this creeps me out. And so basically what she does is that she goes, all right, mom, I got to get going. I gotta go home. She says bye to everybody, gets in her car, and she's driving away. Well, then her car breaks down. And instead of calling somebody for help or calling her mom, because she's in a small little town, it's so crazy. It's like a small little town, but she decides, oh yeah, my car breaks down. I'm just going to walk home. And she decides to walk home instead of calling for help or anything like that. And she's in a part of town where there's nobody, which is really strange because, the movie takes place in this night where all the other craziness is happening, but where she lives, nothing's happening. So she goes down, walking down the street, and she hears the laughing again. But she still doesn't turn around. And she races all the way home. And as she's racing home, we see these really cool little shadows of hands coming up to her. And as she gets home to the door, she hears the laughing one more time, and we kind of see Mary Bailey in the background. And we're like, oh shit, Mary Bailey's there. And as she opens the door, she decides to turn around and nobody's there. She's like, oh, thank goodness. Nobody's there following me. And then she settles in for the night. She's gonna watch a good movie. She sits on her couch with her popcorn, and her dog. She calls her dog to her. And her dog like runs away. Is scared, and at that moment, she turns her head, and sitting next to her, big grin on her face, is Mary Bailey. And that's where the story ends. So, yeah, this is a fun little urban legend story. It is such it. This is what you picture shorts to be when they're in like an anthology film. Got a nice, cool little hook with this little urban legend, and you're like, oh, you kind of have like a message with it where gotta follow the rules of Halloween or else. And we lead up to the story where the girl doesn't follow the rules and she ends up paying for the ultimate price for it. And that's why I like this one. It's just a kind of just a really fun little ghost story. Very simple. The effects, the shadow, the hands, is really cool. The laughing, the creepiness, the you can barely see Mary Bailey in the background. And it works on so many different levels. And that is why this is actually number 6 on my list. All right, guys. So that covers number 6. Let's go ahead and jump into my top 5. Now, these top 5 can actually be mixed around because actually these 5 are really good on their own. And based on what day of the week it is and how I'm feeling when I'm watching this movie, these could actually be moved around. Number 5 could be number 1 and vice versa. So here are my top 5 stories for Tales of Halloween. So our next on our list is a film called Friday the 31st. Now, this is probably one of the most fun stories because it's just wacky and weird. And this one actually plays homage to slasher films and the Evil Dead series. So, what the story picks up is that we see this girl dressed as Dorothy from Wizard of Oz, and she's running through the woods, and we have a serial killer, very Jason Voorhees like, with I think it has a knapsack, like a burlap bag over its head, and they're running through the woods, and he's chasing her down, and eventually he catches up to her and unalives her. So then he's about to grab the body and take it back to his house when a beam of light shines down on him. He's like, "What the fuck? What's going on?" And a little green alien in stop motion, may I add, that shows up in front of him. And it's like, trick or tweet. And he's like, and he's like, I don't have candy, It's like, and things like, trick or tweet. It's about yay big, okay? Like a little tiny little creature. And he goes, and he gets frustrated and he steps on the alien. And then he walks off. Well, the alien goo of the smashed alien goes into the other dead body of the girl Dorothy, and then we go complete Evil Dead where Dorothy comes back to life and she's like floating and hovering. She has the really demonic face like on an Evil Dead movie, and it chases the killer down. And then pretty much our killer becomes the hero in the story where he's fighting off this alien creature, and they're like in his house and they're like hitting each other. They're like cutting off body parts. They're like just going all at it. It's super gory, over the top, very much like Evil Dead with blood splattering everywhere, all over the walls, and eventually it ends with them killing each other and cutting each other's heads off. After they kill each other, basically the alien comes out of the Dorothy body and goes tweet and grabs the slasher's head, and the alien spaceship comes up and takes it away. And then we see an alien spaceship take off. And that's how the story ends. And this is the eighth story in the whole movie, and it's probably one of the most fun. It is so like inventive, like with the whole alien idea aspect of it, with the mixed in with Jason Voorhees, which I feel like I've seen this before in another movie series where there were like alien spiders, and it was a kind of like a Jason Voorhees, or the alien spider to bring people back. I can't remember what the movie was called. I don't know. If you ever seen this movie, let me know in the comment section down below. I really love that the film is like playing homage to the Evil Dead series, to the Friday the 13th series. Such a fun little movie. I like the goofiness. I like the actual special effects using a little stop motion alien in it. I don't know. This one just hit like all the right buttons, and it just was such an enjoyable film. And if you're not going to watch any of the other stories in this movie, I recommend you do watch this one because it's probably like I said, just one of my favorites. All right, let's move on to number 4. All right, coming in at number 4, we have This Means War. And this is the 7th story in the movie, and this was really fun. So, this is a classic horror versus modern horror. So, we have this guy named Boris who is putting up all his Halloween decorations for Halloween. And it's a classic cemetery with your tombstone and everything like that, your skeletons and stuff like that, and your bats and ghosts, whatever. And it's just very classic Halloween. And his next door neighbor across the street ends up having this moving truck come in and they're gonna put up this like extreme horror. So this is like your Saw movie and stuff like that. So where he represents classic horror, like like Frankenstein, the Dracula, and all that, this guy represents more modern horror, where like dismembered bodies, heads hanging on pikes, and stuff like that. Like super gory, heavy rock and roll music, and you can tell that these two people do not like each other. And the classic Halloween guy Boris is like so upset that the other guy Dante, hey, get the name Dante's Inferno, Dante really devil. Uh, so Boris is mad that Dante's scaring away all the kids from coming to trick or treat at his house. So he basically goes up to him and goes, "Hey man, gotta knock it down, turn down the sound and everything like that." And Dante's like, "Yeah man, whatever, you know." And then it causes basically them going to war with each other in a way, where they're kind of like trying to like outdo each other, try to turn off each other's equipment or stealing each other's stuff. And at least these two guys just going at it. And unfortunately it does not end well for these two guys because as their fight exceeds, it keeps getting worse. Okay. As their fighting becomes more intense, basically Boris runs and pushes Dante onto a spike. And in the meanwhile, he also falls and they both end up murdering each other, which is really sad and really crazy, and that's how it ends. And everybody's like, ah, and they're all screaming as these two people lay dead in Dante's yard. So that is where this story ends. And this one's actually kind of fun because I like the idea of having like a war between modern and classic horror. It's a nice little like story about how horror keeps changing over the years, and there's all of us that like the classics, and then all of us that really like the more modern extreme versions. But when we tend to clash with each other, and it's just like you don't have to clash, you don't have to go to war with each other, but we end up doing. We have the horror genre has so many different aspects, and it's always crazy to see that when people are fighting or my scary movies are better than your scary movies. It's just so silly, and that's kind of what this movie is making commentary on. So without further ado, let's go take a look at my third film. Coming in number 3 is The Ransom of Rusty Rex. And this is a really fun one. So this is actually the 9th film in the series. And in this story, we have two of these really bumbling like bank robbers who are trying to figure out what their next like crime is going to be. And then they notice that this little boy who belongs to this rich billionaire is trick-or-treating. So they go after this boy. They kidnap him. And they go call the millionaire guy, Jebediah Rex, and like, hey man, we have your son. And Jebediah Rex is actually played by the great John Landis, and a little cameo in this film. And John Landis is like, you can keep him. They're like, what the heck? Like, so they decide to call him again. They're like, come on, we have your son, give us the money. And he's like, no, no, he's your problem. And they're like, what the heck? And then the little boy, Rusty Rex, mask comes off, and he's like a little demonic imp-like creature. And he's like, ah, and like, oh my god, they're like running around and they're like chasing him and they're trying to fight him off, and he's like causing mayhem, and there's all this chaos ensues. Eventually, they capture him again, and they're like, they call up Jebediah, and he goes, "Why don't you take your son back?" And then we find out that Jebediah's like, "Well, he's not my son." He goes, "He showed up like 3 years ago, held me and my wife hostage, made us pretend that he was our son, and now he's your problem now. And FYI, don't forget to feed him or else." And I'm like, oh my god. So they decide to try to get rid of him. They try to get rid of this creature. And of course, clarity ensues. They don't manage it. And eventually they do kind of get away with it and get rid of the creature. Not before the final twist. So we end up with one of the robbers, Hank, coming back to his car after they've successfully got rid of Rusty, and he finds Rusty in the car eating basically the brains or the head of Dutch, the other bank robber. And we get a little scream, and that ends. And it is so simple. It is a fun little story, about two guys who are down on their luck, and they try to get away with something, and they're basically, you know, their crimes are basically thwarted, and they get in way over their head with the story. And this is such a fun little story too. I really like this one. The actors in this one are great. I know one of the guys is Sam Witwer. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He plays in a lot of Star Wars movies. He's also in Smallville. In Star Wars, he's the voice of Darth Maul, and I think he's also the guy for The Force Unleashed. I think it is. He plays that character, the Jedi, in that one, in that video game series. So great actor, great voice actor too. Oh yeah, he plays Hank, and he's like he's the one we're actually following along the whole story. Such a great actor, so much fun story. I love the cameo of John Landis as the rich billionaire. I like the creature design of Rusty Rex. Yeah, this one is just so much fun, and this actually kind of works as a great little like people getting over their head type of story. And this is actually, like I said, it's number 3 on my list, and it really stands out amongst all 10 of these films. All right, let's get on to number 2. And coming in number 2 is Sweet Tooth. And this is actually the very first story that's told in this whole series and sets the mood. And that's very important because this one, like I said, sets the mood for the rest of the series. That's why that one that's really dark doesn't actually fit, because this one actually sets like the tone for what you're going to be able to see. Another classic urban legend story. I love urban legend stories, and that's why I really like this one. So, what this story is, we have this boy Mikey who has just got done trick or treating, and he's home with his babysitter and her boyfriend, and he's just eating up all the candy. And the boyfriend's like, "If you eat all your candy, you won't have any available for Sweet Tooth tonight." And he's like, "Who's Sweet Tooth?" And the boyfriend goes, "Well, let me tell you the story of Sweet Tooth. So, many, many years ago, there was this boy named Timmy. And Timmy, whenever he went trick or treating, he would always bring the candy home. And his parents were like, no, 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 you can't eat all your candy. And because we have to get it inspected first, like that. So he had to go to bed without eating any candy. Well, one night, his parents decide to eat all of his candy. And they're like, yeah, I love candy. They're doing all that fun stuff. Um, and they're like, oh, we're eating so much candy, we can't eat anymore. So Timmy wakes up and hears them eating all his candy. He gets so angry that he ends up unaliving both his parents. And he eats all his candy too. Eats all the rest of the candy. But he's like, oh, my stomach. I'm still hungry. I still want more candy. So then he goes over and he rips open his parents' stomach and he starts eating the candy that's in their stomach. It's so gory. It's so gruesome. It's so much fun. And it's so over the top. So then the boyfriend tells Mikey that this is why you have to leave a candy out, because if you do not leave a candy out for Sweet Tooth, then he'll come and take all the candy. And Mikey's like, oh, no, I guess maybe I should go to bed. Okay, here. So he leaves the candy and goes to bed. While the babysitter and her boyfriend decide to eat all of his candy. And they eat everything. And we flash forward to a few minutes, and they're like laid in bed going, oh, I ate so much candy. I can't believe I ate so much candy. Oh, I think I overdid it. And then the babysitter goes to the bathroom, and the boyfriend's there, and all of a sudden Sweet Tooth shows up and like murders him and like pulls out his intestines out of his stomach. The babysitter comes back in the room and screams and like and Mikey hears all the screaming in his room, and he goes and hides under his bed. And then he sees his door open, and he hears Sweet Tooth come into his room. But one thing is, Mikey left a candy bar on the floor by his bed. Sweet Tooth goes and picks up the candy bar and eats it and walks out of the room. And then the boy runs to go find the babysitter. And then meanwhile, the parents are coming home, and then they see these two murdered bodies with their like intestines everywhere, candy spewing everywhere, and everything like that. And they scream, and the boy and they look at their son and like, what did you do? And he goes, it was Sweet Tooth. It's so funny. And we do get a callback to this in the Bad Seed episode where we find out that the boy was actually arrested because the parents actually blamed the killing of the babysitter and her boyfriend on the little boy. It's so crazy. But yeah, so that's Sweet Tooth. It was a really fun story to start the whole movie. I really, like I said, I love urban legend stories. I love the lesson that was learned. I love the little hook and the twist at the end. When they get their comeuppance at the end of the movie. That's why this is so high on my list. It's just such a good little story. And the gore is so amazing. It is so gory. The way they have Sweet Tooth look is really scary looking. The practical effects were amazing. Yeah, this one just cuts the cake. And that's why it's so high on my list. All right, let's go look at number one. So coming in at number one on my list is The Night Billy Raised Hell. And this is actually the second story in the whole movie. And this is by far one of my favorites because it is such a great little story with a really good twist at the end, and I'm gonna try not to spoil too much of it. So, with I'm gonna spoil something. This is just it's too good to not spoil. So basically, what the story is, we have this little boy named Billy who's dressed as a little devil. His sister and her boyfriend are teasing him, but not being brave, and they go by this really creepy old house. And the boyfriend's like, "Hey, guess what? That's so so, Mr. Abaddon, and he never hands out candy. So every year we have to egg his house." So he gives Billy an egg. He goes, "You have to egg his house to prove you're not scared." And Billy's like, "Oh, but I am scared." And they're like, "Come on, do it." So Billy goes and throws an egg at the house, but it's caught by Mr. Abaddon. And then his sister and boyfriend just take off running. Like, dude, really? Like, very bad siblings. Because then Mr. Abaddon takes the boy inside of his house, which is then like, what the heck? Really? It's crazy. So, and Mr. Abaddon, who's played by Barry Bostwick in this movie, is like not very menacing either. So he takes the boy in and he goes, I see like you like to play pranks, but you know what? Let me take you out of the town and show you how to really pull pranks. And if you don't know, Abaddon is actually Hebrew for like destruction or something like that. So basically, after this, we see Mr. Abaddon and Billy just going around town causing mayhem. They're stealing cars, they're robbing convenience stores, they're pulling pranks, they're scaring little kids, taking their candy. They're just having a good old time. And at the very end of the story, we have Billy and Mr. Abaddon come back home. But when they enter the house, we find out that Billy is still tied up on the couch. He never left with him. And the person that's dressed like Billy is actually a little demon named Mordecai. And Ezra Abaddon was like, "All right, guys, we already have fun. I hope you learned your lesson, Billy." And he pretty much lets Billy leave. And then ugh, this is a crazy ending. Because Billy leaves the house, and we cut to the Billy being surrounded by a squad of police officers and a little boy, and they're all drawing his gun at him. And Billy pees his pants, and then goes to black, and we hear gunshots. It's like, what the heck? It's such a crazy story. And this is only the second story in the whole movie. And that makes it so bonkers. Oh, man, but it's such a fun story. And that's why it's my number one. It's such a great little story about with a great little ending twist. It reminds me of like a Tales from the Crypt episode or a Twilight Zone episode where you think it's this little boy doing all this crazy stuff, and then you find out at the very end, no, it's actually a little demon named Mordecai. It's such a great little story. And so much fun. The creature effects on the demon is really cool. I really like the way they designed him. And Barry Bostwick does an amazing job as Mr. Abaddon. But yeah. So that is all 10 stories. All ranked from my least favorite to my most favorite. So what do you guys think? Have you ever seen Tales of Halloween? How did you guys rank this movie? Does your ranking match up with mine? Let me know in the comments down below. How would you rank these? But overall, I really do enjoy this one. It's actually on my list of Halloween movies as an honorable mention. I haven't seen this enough to make it one of my favorites. It doesn't live up to like the hype of like say Trick or Treat. Whoa, like Trick or Treat. That's actually my all-time favorite of anthology films for Halloween. But you know what? This has actually gone pretty close, and I actually think you would like it too if you ever check it out. So I recommend if you haven't decided on what you're going to watch this Halloween, I would check this one out. It is such a fun ride. It is campy, it's cheesy, has really great special effects. A lot of the stories are a lot of hits in this one. There's a couple of misses, but you know, you get 10 short stories. If you see one you don't like, just know that the next one's not going to be that far along. That's what makes this one so great. I do recommend that you go ahead and check out Tales of Halloween because I think you'll have a great time watching this one. So, without further ado, guys, let me know in the comment section down below. Did you enjoy this movie? Do you enjoy videos like this where I break down and rank anthology films? If you do, let me know in the comment section down below. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video is posted. And until next time, this is JD with the Figgy Pop Collector Channel.
That concludes a Figgy Pop transmission.